glad that there was a good turnout for this. I think it's a really important topic, and I hope what I present to you today you can take with you and actually find some use for it in your profession. So first I would want to start out talking about, the perceptions of social media. We use the term social media very loosely, I feel. When I hear social media, I just immediately think of Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Sometimes you hear LinkedIn or Foursquare, and of course we know MySpace and Friendster were the social media websites kind of before the big peak of Facebook, or at least that's my perception of it. Now, social media, there's a lot of different types of social media out there, and I think a good definition is kind of saying that they're tools to share and discuss information on the internet. Key elements are going to be your active users. Of course, that's what everyone wants. Engagement, that's a buzzword floating around. There's easy accessibility with social media, and you have this real-time content aspect, which I think is very important. You have an immediacy on the internet already, and then when you add these active users, you get a lot of feedback from your publics. So there's different types of social media. So when you think about building a social media policy, you need to be clear about what social media you're actually defining. So there's different categories, including collaboration, which to kind of wrap your head around that, you can think of Wikipedia or Google Documents, where people come together and share information to create something. And then you have virtual world social media. This is really interactive, probably the most interactive one that's featured. And if y'all have ever heard of Second Life, you can create your own avatar. You actually kind of live in the second world. You go to dinner with people in it, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's very interactive. Something you might not think that social media is, but it definitely is out there. The next one is unusual questions. Yahoo Answers is a great example of this. A user puts a question out there on the web, and then other users can comment on it with a response to it. And you also have answers.com, Amazon Askbill, etc. But then the ones we think of when we say social media, we're mostly talking about personal and professional networking and multimedia sites. This would include the Facebook, YouTube, Twitter sites, as well as other ones like Flickr, DeviantArt, PhotoBucket. So, is there a need for a social media policy? Before doing this research, I didn't really know the answer to that, but now that I've done it, I can say to you today that yes, you need a social media policy for sure. I won't actually go to these links, but I'll tell you a little bit about what I found. There's actually a Facebook group for people that have gotten fired because of the things they posted on Facebook. All you have to do, go to Google and search fired because of Facebook. You'll find a ton of hits on that. One story that I found that I think is particularly interesting is a teacher was going to be fired or suspended because she was holding 2 alcoholic beverages in her hand in a picture that was posted on Facebook. So it's just little things like that that you can prevent with your social media policy. Let them know the guidelines that they need to follow. And we'll also talk today about employee rights, what they should be allowed to do. So many businesses don't have social media policies because they haven't ran into a problem yet with them. And there are so many liabilities out there with social media, with so many employees having access to social media and using it. And this concerns lost productivity, security problems, and reputation issues. With security problems, I just kind of want to mention, Dr. Fisher actually found this after we had turned in our papers, about people kind of going undercover and creating fake profiles to get competitive information from people, kind of, tricking your employees into giving them information. So that's something you kind of have to watch out for now, maybe something that you never even thought about that you might need to cover in your social media policy. So why you need one? Employees are definitely going to use social media. Chances are all of your employees are already on it. But the good thing is that it can benefit your company if they are using it. It can help strengthen your brand image. It can prevent damage to your reputation if you implement your social media policy. And there's other things like creating deep relationships with your publics. So in your social media policy, you just kind of need to explain, what's acceptable and unacceptable behavior. you need to let your employees know that it's just not about the company when you're implementing this, it's also about them, because they can get into legal issues with the things that they post, whether it's intentional or unintentional. So you want to explain all of this through a clearly written and firmly communicated social media policy. And there are a ton of different approaches out there that you can take to creating a social media policy. We'll look at a couple of these. I'll go over the basics with you and then show you what I researched, and then we'll kind of pull it all together with some trends that were all throughout these approaches. The basics of a social media policy, you need to know right offhand that social media policies are not all going to be the same. You really have to build them from the ground up to fit your company's needs. And I love this quote: social media policy isn't one size fits all, it's one size fits one. I think that's very telling. You don't want to just go on the internet, look up a social media policy, stick your company name on it and a logo and say, here's my social media policy. You have to make it in some way where your employees can actually apply it, something that will be easily adoptable by them. And all of the approaches that we'll look at now are going to range from broad to specific overviews. And maybe you'll find something you really like out of these. You can take that, or when I show you the concepts that I pulled from them, you might be able to use that too. The first step is a 5-step approach by Debbie Mayo Smith. She says you need to learn about social media policy, get a good background on it, and then start writing your policy and establish the boundaries you want to convey in it. You need to educate your employees about it, and then you need to monitor your employees' use of social media. And she says, just in a general ending, she says that you need to respond to any feedback you get on your social media websites. Next, we have the velvet glove approach. And this is just kind of, we want you to use social media. You don't really want to restrict anything. You want to focus on the things that they can do. And it's kind of, the employees monitor themselves. It's not necessarily Big Brother watching everyone over their shoulder. And same thing here with the key elements of a social media policy from Public Relations Tactics. They say to show the employees the benefits of them all using social media. You want to focus on the things they can do versus the things they can't do. And I think that'll help strengthen your brand if you can get them to use social media in a good way for your company. A more specific approach by Michael Carruth in the Harvard Business Review. He says that all company policies should apply in your social media policy. So any harassment or discrimination policies that you have for your company should apply on social media as well. He also says you shouldn't release confidential information, maybe something concerning your client or your business techniques. Don't use company logos or trademarks, copyright infringement. No disrespectful, vulgar behavior. There's a quote, I cannot remember where I found it from, but basically paraphrasing, it says that common sense doesn't necessarily translate over to social media. You kind of have to remind them. You feel less inhibited when you're on the internet. You feel like you can do anything. So, you just need to remind them and lay it out for them. Let them know. And lastly, a really specific approach came from Credit Union. I thought it was interesting. I didn't know that they had developed a lot of social media policy literature, but they have. And it's very interesting. I would suggest taking a look at it if y'all ever have a chance. They say to create 2 subparts to your policy. Do company pages versus personal pages. You want to define things, like I said before, social media, define those key terms for them. What are you talking about? You want to designate a contact person who's kind of in charge of the social media policy, or maybe if, we'll talk about it, if you have a unified voice approach, you'll have one person in charge of all social media for the company. You want to include contents, disaster planning, explain security issues like I mentioned before, the espionage stuff, and detail employee use of social media. So from all of this, I kind of came up with 6, themed concepts that I thought were really important for helping to create a social media policy for your company, and I hope they will be useful to you today. The concepts are going to be strategy, company culture, unified voice versus multiple voices, monitoring, business use versus personal use, and legalities. The first one with strategy, we all know what strategy is here. We use this all the time. It's an overall plan to achieve a specific goal. So what the strategy does, of course, it's going to create a purpose for your social media policy. Why do you have a social media policy? Because I'm telling you to? No, that's not why. You have to have a purpose for it. You want to make it cohesive and understandable for your employees so they can apply it and adopt to those policies you're implementing. And once again, define what social media is. So for example, if you want to increase in productivity, you may want to prohibit all employees from using social media on work time. Another one, you might just have the communications department in charge of social media and prohibit other employees from using it. If you want to increase brand awareness online, maybe then you promote use of social media by employees. Now, company culture, I don't want to say it's the most important part of writing your social media policy, but I think it's really going to shape how you write it. It's going to dictate, how you lay it out, the tone you use, whether it's going to be, guidelines versus rules. It's really going to make this adaptable by your employees. If you take those visions and values that your company has already and put them in place in your social media policy, the employees are more likely to follow it. You want to make it easy for them. So for example, if you have a progressive company, you might just do guidelines. You might use bullet points of examples versus really long paragraphs written out about specific situations. The tone's going to be a little bit more relaxed and so forth. This example, I love this example. Cisco, the big technology company, they're all about this human network and connectivity. However, they prevent their employees from using social media at work. Now you have all of these tech-savvy people working for you. They go in and reconfigure the computer systems to get on social media. And they did a survey of this, and a ton of people admitted to reconfiguring the equipment, and even more of them admitted to using their personal devices to get on social media at work. So it's things like this that you have to look out for. Now, unified voice versus multiple voices, it's just how it sounds. Unified voice, you're going to have one person who's completely in charge of all the social media pages for a company. They really control the voice. They're able to put things up on social media sites for the company. They act on behalf of them. If they need to take something down, they can. With multiple voices, though, you have many employees using your social media sites. They can contribute to the online presence. They build that up for you, and it creates a conversation within and outside of the company. And another great thing about this, they feel like they're helping, they're involved with the company, they're speaking about you, so the employee morale increases. And key things to think about when choosing between this, if your company culture and strategy hasn't already defined this for you, you want to think about how a unified voice may make employees feel less valuable if they don't have a say on social media, if they feel like you're taking that away from them. With multiple voices, be aware of the legal risk involved. You have so many people out there talking about you, speaking on your behalf. What are they saying? Are you going to be able to monitor all of it? And we'll talk about the legal risk in a minute. But first we'll speak about monitoring for a second. Monitoring needs to be done in two ways. You need to outline how you're going to monitor the company pages, and then how you're going to monitor employee use of social media. With the pages for your company, you want to respond to that feedback. It's no longer people just talking about your company, they're actually talking to you now. So you want to be immediate in your response to them, and definitely get back to them when they're talking to you. And then for employee use, you have to disclose that you're going to be monitoring them. You want it to be as non-intrusive as possible, and you want to only keep it to be work-related. You can't go on someone's page and see that they dislike something or like something, and you're offended by that. It has to be work-related. And one interesting concept that I found in my research was called deputized employees. And this is where a group of employees kind of, not police each other, but just kind of monitor each other online. And this is good for a couple reasons. They feel like, it's just the employees watching out for each other. It's not so much someone high up watching you. Also, there's easy accessibility. you're more likely to be friends with someone you work with than the company being able to access your profile due to privacy issues. But of course, this would be something you would have to disclose and explain to the employees. Next, we have business use versus personal use. A big question that comes up is, who's a representative of a company on social media? And it's generally accepted that if you say on your profile, for instance, or your blog that you're an employee for so-and-so, then you are a representative. Also, if you use your company email address for that account, then you are a representative of that company. Now, there's kind of some gray areas with this. Say for instance, I have my own blog and I say that I'm an employee for the University of Memphis, I'm a graduate assistant, and I have a blog about communications. Sometimes I mention University of Memphis communications and give my opinion on them. I should just blatantly say that these opinions are my own, they do not reflect my company. And you can let your employees do that by doing a disclaimer statement like this. The posting on this site are my own and don't necessarily represent the philosophy, strategies, or opinions of my company. And another great way to do this that makes the person accountable for what they're writing is just to simply use first person. It may seem, kind of standard, but just remind them of that. And next, business pages, they need to be strictly professional. Don't have personal conversations on the Facebook page or the blog. You want to keep it strictly professional. Now, gray areas can exist here too. Say for instance, if a client tries to talk to you on a social media site, you have to handle that and handle it in a way that's still professional versus personal. So make your social media policy flexible. Be willing to update it, and as you go, as you run into problems, make changes to it. And last, we have legalities. This is probably the biggest thing you hear with social media policy, that you're going to run into a lot of risks, and that's very true. There's compliance problems, defamation lawsuits, copyright infringement, harassment and discrimination issues, class action lawsuits. There's all types of stuff out there. This isn't even an entire list of the possibilities. But when you're writing a social media policy, make sure you mention things like client confidentiality, source attribution if they're writing blogs or posting something, non-personal discussions again, and use of company computers. And the last thing concerning legalities, be aware of your employees' rights. Everyone in here has freedom of speech, and that carries over to social media, of course. We all have protected concerted activity. Two pieces of legislation that I advise you to look at would be the National Labor Relations Act and the Federal Electronic Communications Act. The National Labor Relations Act is very in-depth. It gives a lot of examples of what's acceptable behavior and things that you can't prevent employees from doing, such as making disparaging comments about a company or supervisor, or listing a company name, address, or phone number. And then the Federal Electronic Communications Act, it basically says that any legal constitutional activities that are done on social media or portrayed on them, it's still legal in that way, and you shouldn't be able to reprimand someone for that. So going back to the teacher who was holding the 2 alcoholic beverages, in this case, I would think that they would say, no, you can't fire her for that. So, in summary, today what I hope you will take away from this is that you definitely need to have a social media policy. You need to build one from the ground up and make it your own. Some of the risk after today. Hopefully you'll look into it more and just get a feel for why you need one, if I haven't convinced you today. Incorporate the building blocks I've given you today, or use one of those approaches that I mentioned before. There's tons of information online about this that you can look at. And lastly, just be flexible with it. Like I said, if you run into a problem, add it to your social media policy. Learn from the mistakes and just go forth from there. So that's basically all I have today. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
What, if anything, did your research reveal about what Cisco did when they discovered that so many of their employees had made their own workaround or were using their own personal devices?
The study, actually, it was just basically a chart with a little, information about what they asked the employees about their use. It did not say what they did after that. It was just basically explaining, how they portray this company culture and values but they don't reflect that in their social media policy, so it failed. Like I said, if you can find that study, I'm not sure where I found it from, but if you go online and try and search for it, it'll give you just astounding numbers of how many people were actually on personal devices looking up social media sites during work, and then once again, even going as far to reconfiguring the computers at work. So. Yes.
Do the policies, do they recommend that you have, I think if you said this, but a policy on people's personal Facebook pages, even if they don't mention anything about the company they work for, they're still held to some accountability for what they put on their personal pages?
Well, with that would come into the business use versus personal use. Like I said, you're a representative of a company if you say, I work for so-and-so, or you're a representative if you use your company email account for that. So that's when it would apply, and you need to make that clear in your policy. You know, you can't restrict someone who, you know, doesn't put anything on their page. You can't really go into that area. That's their complete personal life at that point. But when they're saying that they're a representative for your company, then that's where these rules come into play. Did you have a question?
I did.
Oh.
Lost track of what it was.
Yes.
Did you find any information on how companies dealt with people using their personal devices at work?
No, I did not. This paper was just about, you know, we actually had to research a company's social media policy and try to make it better than it was or completely recreate it. So that was part of the paper, and then the rest of my research was on the background of social media policy, how to actually build one for you. So I didn't go that far into looking at it, how they dealt with it. But that would be great to look at. Yes?
Yeah, I found that like one of our key problems is that is encouraging staffers to use social media. And you know, we have staffers of all different age groups, and obviously the ones who are a little bit older, you know, tend to be like, oh, that's for the young folks to use and stuff. So it's like almost, I'm sitting here thinking, you know, it's like if I had a hard time getting anyone to use it, just like begging them and like setting up, you know, demonstrations, etc. You would think that like a social media policy would just have the net effect of saying, okay, great, there's some dangers. That confirms I'm not going to do anything. Could you speak a little bit? Maybe I'm totally wrong about that.
I think in that situation, depending on whoever you work for, maybe that would be a way to go back and look at the unified voice versus multiple voices. If using multiple voices is what you're aiming for, I think educating them about it would be your best bet. Maybe hold some sort of sessions to get them used to it. You'll have. Then I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I mean, maybe try and look at it from the unified voice perspective and go that way to get your voice out there online. But as for, you know, trying to make people to use it, I don't really know how you can try to, you know, get them to use it unless you just kind of mandated it. And I don't know if that's something y'all would, you know, do. But yeah, so I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question, though.
Thank you.
You mentioned in your research you looked at a lot of companies' policies. Is there one that stood out in your mind as being a good example?
The one that I actually looked at in my research was Razorfish Ad Marketing Agency in New York. They had a wonderful one. I wanted to definitely look at, you know, communications company, and when I looked at theirs, I could obviously tell that they care about their employees. They want them to use social media, but they want to protect their company and their employees. And, you know, their tone is very relaxed in it. It's probably about, I think, maybe 5 to 8 pages. It's not very long, and most of those pages are just bullet points of examples going through. It's not very long at all. It was a short read, and, you know, I had a tough time trying to add anything to it to make it better. But I just suggested for them to focus on monitoring more and maybe implement that kind of deputized employees. I found that, extremely, just a great concept to implement in your social media policy. That way, everyone's helping one another, and it might be easier if everyone's watching out for one another than just having one person try to keep track of what everyone's doing. Yes?
Brittany, did your research go into anything about how, I guess, stratified the social media policy should be in terms of inside an organization? I work for a small command in the Navy. Should I have one for my small command, or should I simply adopt the one that my parent command has, or?
I did not go into that. However, I know, just using University of Memphis and even the athletics department as an example, the athletics department, whatever it is over the conferences, they have a social media policy, but right now U of M is actually developing a policy for students, and then it's kind of like, student athletes, where do you fall under? Because you're at U of M, you're also an athlete. Like I said, I didn't really go into that, so I don't really have an answer for it, but I think that you just need to develop it for what you need it for. Once again, going back to that strategy, what's the purpose in creating it for? Is it gonna help more if you do multiple ones for each side? So, yes.
I was wondering, when I worked at Service Master, there was a great tug of war going on between marketing and PR. And I was wondering, in your findings, did you find out who owns it, who should own it? The marketing people want to market to death, and the PR people want to manage brand reputation. So I found that just single point was such a divider in so many. So I didn't know if you came across what other companies are doing to confront that or deal with that.
I did not, but I'll tell you, this was for a public relations class. So most of the stuff I looked at was from public relations articles. In my opinion, marketing and PR is completely different in my head. They have some of the same concepts, and you can go back and forth, but communications, that's what PR is all about. Marketing goes into more stuff, so I would see, PR doing it more.
Well, I still think we're in its infancy, even though we're X amount of years into Facebook.
Yeah.
And I don't think people, based on your definition of social media, where there's conversations going on, I don't think it's so much that people want to be sold yet, and that was always what I tried to articulate to the marketing folks. So.
Exactly, yes.